Welcome to another Western Ag Life Voices podcast, where we celebrate the people that make up the rich fabric of the Western lifestyle. Please do us a favor and thank the sponsors, because without them, we couldn't bring you these free podcasts.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is Paul Ramirez with the Western Ag Life podcast, and I have a fantastic guest on this morning, and we'll get right to the interview. Before then, though, we'll pay a few bills here. We want to give kudos to the 11th annual Anchor F Club Calf Sale, which is going to take place on Sunday, November the 23rd, and that is going to be in beautiful Sonoyta, Arizona, at the Santa Cruz County Fairgrounds. They'll have a preview of the cattle at noon, and then the live auction will take place at 1 o'clock. There is no internet bidding. However, you are able to bid on the phone, so make sure you reach out prior to the sale and contact Dean Fish. Dean Fish's cell phone number is 520-988-8009, or you can reach him at his email address at Anchor F Cattle Company, or at his at his email address, anchorf@gmail.com. And one unique thing about Dean's sale is that he doesn't sell any calves at the ranch, and so every calf that he's going to sell for this coming up fall fairs of next year, all those calves will be at the sale, and none of them are sold at the ranch, so that's a unique deal. So we look forward to that, and we'll see you there on Sunday again, November the 23rd. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here's my guest, Mr. Earl Graham, all the way from the great state of California. Earl, what's happening today?
Well, we have a beautiful day out here this morning, Paul. We had some rain yesterday, and which is always a nice thing in this desert where I live. We're lucky to get about 6 inches a year, so we got almost a quarter of an inch yesterday. So that's a nice rain for us.
Amen, for sure. Yep, and we've had some out here. Out here in Arizona, our old saying out here, Earl, is we take a calf in the rain anytime we can get it. And
yes, sir.
Of course, it rained in 3 days what it rains in a whole year, so that's about par for the course, though, huh?
That's exactly what happens here most of the time as well.
Earl, so you're one of those people when I first started this podcast years ago that I wanted to have on, so I'm kind of fulfilling one of my goals as far as this podcast is. We wanted to have people that live the Western lifestyle, that, have, worked on ranches, been ranchers, agriculture people, and, people of the Western lifestyle, horsemen and so forth. And so certainly you're one of those guests that I've wanted to have on for a long time. And I certainly appreciate you indulging me. And I know you're busy, but I appreciate you coming on here with us today.
I'm excited about it.
Yes, sir. So Earl, let's go back. Let's start out with your childhood. So where did you grow up at? And
I grew up in a little town in Southern California in the Mojave Desert called Victorville, California.
Victorville, huh?
Victorville. My dad was a World War II veteran, and I was actually born in Ladysmith, Wisconsin. And after the war, my dad got released from the Army, got discharged, and of course, those were the days when the draft came through, and he had gotten drafted for the war, and when he got out, there was really not much of an opportunity for him back in his hometown. So he struggled there for a few years, got married, and had 3 kids. I was the youngest of the 3 when they decided to come to California. I was 8 months old. And they made the venture out here in an old 39 International bobtail truck, kind of like the Beverly Hillbillies, and got out here, and he went to barber school, and he became a barber, and he thought he was going to live the suburban life until he got his first house in a little suburb in Victorville, and realized that wasn't for him. And he had an opportunity in the barber shop to buy and sell and trade livestock. And so he seen that opportunity. So he bought some acreage, built a home, and that was the beginning of me getting into buying and selling things, was working with my dad on that project, lifelong project.
So that's where your swapping started.
That's where my swapping started. I have a story that I tell on my dad. He was a good man. hard man, but a good man, a typical World War II veteran. I was probably in the second or third grade, and we have a ghost town just north of us here outside of Barstow called Calico Ghost Town, fairly famous ghost town. And it was one of our school field trips in either the second or third grade. And I had asked him for $1 to go on that field trip. And he looked at me like I was crazy.
Hmm.
But he did go into our pantry, and he gave me a handful of peanuts and a handful of walnuts. And he says, if you're smart, you can take those on the school bus and sell them to the kids on the trip. And when you get over there, you'll have some money. He says, now, if you're smart, you'll buy chewing gum and candy with that. And on the way back, you'll trade them out of all the postcards and tomahawk crap you want. And when I got off the bus, I had the biggest pile of tomahawks and postcards and stuff you could imagine. And that was the beginning of me learning how to really trade. So from that point on, I never had to buy a Duncan yo-yo or any of that stuff. I always traded it. And, I was fortunate. I got to grow up in a time when agriculture was pretty abundant in our valley. We have a river that flows through this valley, and it's one of the few rivers that flows to the north. So it comes out of our San Bernardino Mountains and flows eventually into Death Valley. And so that meant there were farmers all up and down that river bottom. And as I got into high school, I was able to start trading with the different ranchers. And most of the time I traded hay for something that they wanted. And then I'd learn to sell that hay. And I still have a hay business today because of starting doing that when I was 16 years old. Again, when I turned 16, my dad had said, I went to him and I said, Dad, I want to go get a job. My brothers were older. I had a younger sister. And I said, I'd like to go get a job. So I got some money to pay for my insurance and stuff. And he says, well, let's think about that. So, of course, he bought and sold horses, and most of the horses that he bought and sold were teams. In those days, we didn't have side-by-sides, and we didn't have things that people uses around the ranch like they do today. So they would use a one-up or a two-up with a little four-wheel wagon behind it to bring the hay around to do different things, easier than hooking up a tractor. In those days, tractors, brand new tractors were working pretty good, but some of the ones that had come out just after the war, there was always a mechanical problem. So if you wasn't mechanically inclined, it was easier to use a team than a tractor most of the time for, feeding every day and the different chores you did. So he always had teams that he would sell people. And so that was kind of running out about the time I hit high school. People were starting to use old pickups and different things like that. And so he said, hey, why don't you take the horse trading business, and you can still trade the cattle and the goats and the sheep and the chickens and stuff for me. And you just take you got a little hay business started already. Just keep building on that hay business. And says, I don't know that you need a job. And so that's where when I started trading horses. And of course, I moved right into saddle horses and started developing customers. And, surprising how many of those customers I started with when I was 16. And because they were grown men at that point, I've buried almost every one of those men. And a lifelong experience trading horses with some of those guys. It's kind of funny. There was a gentleman by the name of Jack Lilly, who's a very famous man that furnished horses for the movie industry. And he has a son, Clay Lilly, that's down in New Mexico, around the Farmington area, that furnishes a lot of horses for the movie industry. And I traded a lot with his dad and furnished horses for them in different movies over the years, and cattle. And Clay calls me the other day and says, hey, Earl, I've got about 500 saddles and a bunch of harnesses and a whole bunch of stuff that I need to sell that was my dad's. And he says, if I brought it out there, do you think you guys could run it through your auction house and sell it for us? And it's just amazing that, I first started trading horses with his dad when I was 17 years old. And still today, at the age of 72, I still get the benefit from that relationship. it's just, the one thing I've learned in my life, it's all about relationships. And, as a kid in high school, I got to be an FFA, and I still have kids that I showed with that are now old like I am, that we still do business. Okay. It's just the relationships that you get to have. And, it doesn't mean that you do a lot of social things unless you meet at a fairgrounds or you see somebody at an event or something. It's just nice to get to know that you still get to do things with you know, um, but anyway, I knew when I was a young man at about 12, I wanted to be an auctioneer. And, I went on that quest, and that's how you and I got to come together, is because of our auctioneer
Amen.
life,
Amen.
and, again, another very fun deal in life because of some of the people you get to meet and the experiences you get to have. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. And uh, so, that's kind of my childhood. I had a very good childhood. I had a full family intact. I have both my brothers are still alive. My sister's still alive, and we're still a close-knit family. We talk to one another at least once a week, if not more often than that. And it's pretty neat.
You're a blessed man.
Yes.
And, I just want to interject there. Certainly you talk about these long term relationships that you have with people, but Earl, you wouldn't have maintained those relationships if you hadn't have been integral part of keeping that relationship. And that means being honest and, doing,
Integrity
doing,
in
doing good business.
integrity means everything, and I can tell you a story. I was probably 16 or maybe 17 years old, and we had a neighbor, and he had chicken houses, and he had a daughter that was probably 10 years and 5 to 10 years older than me. And he had bought her a really nice saddle horse in those days, and it was a half Arab, which, today we don't think much of, but don't think about. But in those days, that was a pretty sought after animal. And he decided to sell her, and he called me, and he decided to sell that little Arab mare, half Arab mare. And he called me and asked me about her, and I said I'd come over and look at her. I hadn't seen her in a while. I went over there, and of course, I started laying my stuff on him, and I misled him into thinking his mare had very much value, and I bought her real cheap. And how it would work, at the end of every day, I would take the money, whatever it was I sold for my dad or for myself, and I would have notes with it. And of course, we dealt 90% in cash in those days. And I would
Mhm.
have it laid out on the table that evening before I'd go to bed. I'd do all my homework and set that out there. And my dad got up early that morning. After I sold that horse, and I had out there, because I wanted to keep the cash that I'd paid for the horse back in my pocket. Okay, put it back in, so I had that cash to pay for stuff. And my dad seen I had made a lot of money off this horse, almost tripled my money. And so he comes in, and he gets a hold of me and says, "Hey, come out here and explain this to me." And so I told him what horse it was and who I'd bought it from. And he says, "So why did our neighbor happen to give you that horse so cheap?" So I had to confess that I had misled the man. My dad made me take every bit of that money back over and give it to that man. Okay. My dad says the right thing for you to do, because you've lied and you've cheated. You didn't make it off of your skill. You made it off of lies. You take all that money back and give it back to that man. If he wants to pay you a commission, that's his business. If I was him, I wouldn't. But if he wants to, you can. And I took it over to him and gave it to him. And he was another World War II veteran, and he was a hard man. And he just looked kind of scowled at me when he realized what I had done, and took the money, folded it up, and put it in his pocket. And I would still go by and see him every once in a while. I wanted to make sure that I didn't lose that friendship. And after I had completed auctioneer school and started being an auctioneer, that was the beginning of my first auction company, was doing his farm sale. I got to go back and do a farm sale for him and his wife. And he told me, he says, "I'm doing this because of the fact you brought me back that money that day."
Mhm.
And I thought I'd scored. And I really did score. I really did score.
Sure. Yeah, you
You
learned
know,
two things. You
yes,
know what I mean? You learned how to maintain a relationship, and and I'm sure you're eternally grateful for having a father, that would, tell you that what's right and what's wrong, and certainly make you go and rectify that, correct that.
right, right.
A lot of people don't have parents like that.
No, no, I was very blessed. I was very
Hmm.
blessed, and as I go through my life and I looked at it, I realized that was a foundation. And you know, so when I got 20, I got married. Um, I was a young auctioneer trying to break into the industry, and as you did, that's a very difficult thing to do. We spend a lot of time doing things around an auction that has nothing to do with being on the microphone, just so that
Amen.
maybe we get a few minutes of mic time, right?
You sell some box lots or something, right?
Yes,
Sell some
yes,
feed buckets.
or
Hmm.
something, you know, the rejects or anything.
Hmm.
And so of course I was still doing that. I was buying and selling a few things and doing that. And one of the ways that I had learned to support myself while I was in high school, I had an opportunity. ABS, American Breeder Service, had a program at the California State Mint Institution in Chino. They had a big dairy on that prison, and they would bring their people in and teach you artificial insemination to cattle. And of course, Southern California had a lot of dairies in those days, a lot of dairy cattle. And so as a senior, I got to go down and go through that course. And so when I got out of high school, I had a job with American Breeder Service as an AI tech and selling semen and breeding cows. And so that allowed me a schedule that I could still go do my trying to break into my auctioneer career. And it also allowed me a schedule to sell horses and things to the dairymen and get to know dairymen. To this day, I still have relationships with those families.
Hmm.
Again, it's all about relationships. But anyway, I was 20 years old and I met my wife, and her and I decided to get married. We got married, and there was a very famous cowboy by the name of Gene Rambo come out of Central California, and he was also affiliated with American Breeder Service. And he came down south and he was looking for a guy to go up there in 1974, the winter of 74, 73, to be an AI tech on a couple of ranches. And he come and approached me, and I told him, I says, I'm not interested in a job, but I'm interested in a deal. I had put together a pretty nice set of cows, and I needed a place for them, a home for them. I said, if you can get me with a rancher where I can move my cows in with his, I said, I'd be very interested in that deal. So he put together a program where two different ranchers needed herdsmen, that I would go do that. And so we did. And of course, then the wreck of 74 hit. And any of us that's been in the livestock business and around the old timers all know what that wreck was like. And it was nothing short of the depression in the cattle business. And so both those men were very stable, that I had put my cattle with, but it was on the central coast of California, and some years it can forget to rain up there, as it does in a lot of places.
Yeah.
It- Cattle prices had become nothing overnight. Hay was high, and they came to me and said, we're probably going to sell our herds off with this drought. We're kind of afraid it'll last a couple of years, and we don't want to, spend a bunch of money in hay. We already have. They showed me what they spent, and they said, "Do you want to keep your cows, or do you want to sell them?" And this hay bill's got to get paid naturally. And so I started selling my cows, and they had pretty well eaten themselves up with the hay prices and with the less value that they were. And it can happen real easy. And so anyway, when I left there and came back south, um, I didn't have much capital. It was pretty much all gone. And so we got to start over. And of course, it was back to uh, my one known skill of trading horses and buying and selling horses. And Rhonda was a good rider, and Rhonda knew how to ride horses well and present horses well. And so we started buying horses and putting them back into different types of registered auctions. And I was trying to be an auctioneer, and we lived on a lot of pinto beans and very little ham hocks in the pinto beans.
Skinny hog, skinny hog hawks.
Yes. And so,
Oh my goodness.
it was a very humbling time. And of course, by then, Rhonda was pregnant, and we had a child on the way, and I was running low from time to time on cash flow, because when you're married and you got a kid on the way, you got to have cash flow. So I started picking up construction work, because I had a buddy that had a little construction company, and so I started working for him. Then I had an opportunity to go to work for a larger construction company, and I realized that I had aptitude for engineering, and uh, it was kind of fun, and I had an aptitude for it, and I didn't realize that. And within the next 5 or 6 years of still trying to be an auctioneer and trying to balance all of these things and be a husband and do all of this, working a lot of hours, I started going to school to become a engineer. When I say school, I did not enroll in college. We were training some show horses at that point in life, Rhonda was, and one of our customers was an engineer who was with a very large firm, and he instructed me on what books I needed to read and study in order to be able to become an engineer. And so on about a 3-year process of spending most every night up until midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, going over those books. First time I took my test, I passed.
Really?
And I became a engineer, and then I built a construction company out of that. And by the mid 80s, I had about 50 people working for me, and we did pipeline work. And that allowed Rhonda and I had already started buying property in the Central Coast, and that allowed us to continue to buy more property and start building our ranch. And then 89 came along, and of course in our valley we really went through a big recession, because we closed down a lot of military bases, and a lot of them were closed in California. So California really went through a recession right then. And so again, I found myself in a awkward situation. And luckily by then in 88, I had decided that I was kind of gotten off track, and I decided I wanted to sell my construction company and go find me a sale barn and buy a sale barn. And so in
Oh Lord.
1990, I was able to buy my first sale barn, and then started a whole new career of being a sale barn operator. And
Probably wish you would have stayed laying pipe.
no, I'll tell you, I that is something, and it was a very unique sale. It was a Saturday sale, and we sold all species, but we'd still get 500-600 head of cattle in. We'd sell maybe 100 pigs, 200-300 goats, and 300 or 400 head of cattle. Our customers were typically the Indians off the Indian reservation where we were. That was the most of our customers. And they'd come to town with a pickup truck or an old trailer stuffed plumb full of stuff, and they wanted to cash that in and go Christmas shopping or go school shopping or just go have some money. And it was a lot of fun dealing with those folks. And again, I still have relationships with some of those tribes. It was just a lot of fun getting to deal with those folks. And it was, like I said, a Saturday deal. So it was a big deal when people would come to town and bring their stuff. And you might only see them, once every other month or something. They'd load up their, God only knew what they were going to have in the back of that truck, or that trailer.
You never knew until they loaded it, huh?
Yeah, you did not know,
Oh my goodness.
but it was a lot of fun, and I did
And
that
so,
for a while. Yes.
Earl, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, you cut out there for a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know if
Yeah.
it was you on my side,
I
but
don't know.
yeah, I'll trim that out. I can trim that out.
Okay.
Did it go blank for you the screen go dark?
Yes, no, it didn't go
Okay.
dark. There was this nothing. You just held perfectly still.
Okay. All right. So I'll trim that part out. We'll find that part. Let me write this down real quick.
All right.
25, 16, 25, 16. All right. So you were talking about what people showed up with all kinds of stuff.
All kinds of stuff, and it was a typical Saturday sale. It was absolutely mostly a family deal, because on Saturdays, we're going to go to the auction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I bought it from an individual, and he was in real bad financial shape. He hadn't been running it very well, and he seen what I had done with it, and he owned another bigger sale barn. And after I had it and got it back up really going good and having a lot of fun, he came to me and offered me a lot of money for it. And I thought, my gosh, he's going to pay me more money than I'll make here in the next 5 or 6 years. I probably should just sell it. And so I did. And I was sorry the second I sold it. And so now I'm looking for another sale barn. Unbeknown to me, that had put him in such a bad financial position, that on his next P&S audit, he was told he had to liquidate everything. And they'd gave him so long to get rid of stuff. And that little sale barn the property was owned by a very large developing company, had bought that property and all the surrounding property where the sale barn was. And they had decided to shut it down about the same time. So that one got shut down within a year or so of me selling it back to him. And then he was in such bad financial shape, P&S told him he had to sell his other barn. And so I was kind of standing in the wings, and I got to buy that barn as well from him then. And that's how I ended up in Chino, just buying that situation from him.
And so where was the first sale barn you bought at?
In a little town called San Jacinto, California.
And so what was that sale called?
That was called San Jacinto Sale Barn.
San Jacinto Sale Barn. Okay.
And it was nestled up against the San Jacinto Mountains in the little town of San Jacinto, just north of Hemet, California. And Hemet in those days had a lot of horses. So I started a Friday night horse sale there, because the developers had come in and was buying up those horse ranches, and those people had a lot of brood mares and was selling brood mares. And I started a Friday night horse sale there. And I mean, we would have nights, we would have 80, 90 head of horses there every Friday night.
Wow.
People selling out of the horse industry out of Hemet, California. And then I moved that horse sale. That was part of why he wanted that business, was he wanted my horse sale. And then he moved that to Chino with his cow barn, and he never was having any success with that. And then and that was part of what got him in a financial bind, trying to promote his horse sale. And he just never could get it up and running. And then I ended up buying him out. And of course, that horse sale, then I really got to work on that. And of course, I knew enough horse traders and knew enough people in the industry that I could get horses in there, and we could get them sold and get things done. And that became a very large horse sale. And yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah, so we skipped over. So you and Rhonda, though, you guys had some progeny, right?
Yes, we had three daughters.
Three daughters. Let's talk about them.
All right. Well, my oldest daughter is she's quite a lady. She grew up with just a real entrepreneur spirit.
I wonder where she got that from.
She one of the first things she did is, of course, while I was doing all of this, we still always had a horse business, buying and selling horses, and I got into the horse rental business. In California and Arizona, we have a lot of men's rides, and a lot of those men need to lease a horse for that ride. And I used to furnish 100 and some head of horses every year to a ride in Wickenburg, the Wickenburg ride. It's I can't remember exactly when it is, but it was usually about 120, 130 horses that I'd send into Wickenburg for that ride, that we'd send over there, and the wranglers and everything. And we did about 50 different events like that a year. Besides, we would put horses into the movie industry, and in the summer we had horses in summer camps. So was always in the horse industry, and I had learned to produce at that time when Lorinda first started her first business. I had learned how to I had decided to start producing team pinnings. That was a big deal in the early '80s, and it was just coming on, and there was a real need for people to put on those team pinnings, and so I started producing team pinnings. And of course, one of the things that Lorinda first seen was she wanted to have a snack bar at them. And so that was her deal. She would run the snack bar, and her uncle even had given her one of those big old timey cash registers that you might have seen way back when in a hardware store or something. And so she had labeled everything on there. So when the tape rolled out, she knew exactly how many candy bars she'd sold, and she knew how many bags of potato chips she'd sold, because she could push that into that. And when you pulled that old handle down, it printed that for you, you know. And so
Those are things you can't teach people.
no, no.
No.
So she had her snack bar business going, and then she was she was really involved in FFA, and she was the first person from her high school, the first female to have become an American farmer, and she was the first student to have become an American farmer at her high
Wow.
school. It was a
Quite an
fairly new
honor.
high school, a real honor. And so she was really involved in FFA, did very well there, went to college. And while she was in college, of course, through her different businesses and her ag stuff, her mother and I never charged her for the animals or the feed or anything, but all of that money went into a college fund, okay? And so she had a pretty good college fund starting out to college, and she worked. And I sent her first summer to auctioneer school with her experience. And after that, I says, there's nobody going to let you sell, but you'll have value working around an auction house, whether it's livestock or whatever it is. And most of the time, you can work that with a college schedule. So she did. She went right to work for Fresno Stockyards up there in Fresno, California, while she's going to Fresno State. And about her third year, she started telling me, Dad, I'm going to run out of money. I don't have enough money to get through college. And I didn't really understand what she was trying to tell her dad. What she was wanting to do is take her money and start her a business. So anyway, finally, she told me what her plan was. She wanted to have a business, a tack trailer, and go around to the different events up there on the weekend and sell tack out of her tack trailer. So her and I set off on a venture to go buy a bunch of tack wholesale, and but it had to be nice quality tack. It couldn't be just the typical stuff that you might find at a Saturday night horse sale.
Mhm.
So we went on a quest and started loading her up with tack, and she started that business. And that business was called the One Stop Cowboy Shop. And her logo was a stop sign. And she made a very big success out of that. And she ended up, at one point, she sold that business. And then she started another business. And it was a business where she had learned to buy jewelry. And she had jewelry counters set up in different women's hair salons. She'd set a jewelry case in there, and the salon owner got to make a commission off of it without investing any money. And Lorinda's money was invested in all those jewelry pieces. And she ended up having about 30 or 40 hair salons up and down the central coast of California with jewelry in it. She got that business up going very well, and then she sold that business. And then she ended up meeting her current husband, was on a trip to Texas, and she gets married, and then she starts a business called Gypsy Soul. And that business went very large, and that was very decorated flip-flops. And she designed all kinds of really unique flip-flops and belts and stuff. And she ended up selling that business to the people that own Cinch.
Okay.
And they took that business and they ran with it for a while. And then they ended up selling it to Michael Tusky. And so she's now has a business that she does, a company called Lucky Chuck Socks. and so she, which is a nothing but a sock company, socks made for basically women, but a lot of men wear them, I guess. And they're kind of a boot sock, and she sells a lot of socks under the name Lucky Chuck Socks. And so it's she's quite an individual. They have two daughters, and so I have a granddaughter this year going to graduate from OSU, and another daughter going to the college there in Fort Worth. And my oldest granddaughter is this year, she is part of the homecoming court for OSU. So this week is a big week for her because this weekend is, of course, their homecoming game.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm very proud of my oldest daughter and her family and her husband. Her husband has a landscaping business, and he does real high-end landscaping. He does a lot of things there and there in Weatherford, Texas, and he builds a lot of real nice big horse ranches and does all the outside scape for those big horse ranches. And so they have done very well, and it's very nice because they on their property they have a second home that they keep just for Rhonda and I. So when we go back there, we have a home we walk right into. All of our stuff's in there. It's our clothes are in the closet, and it's just a second home for us, which is
Wonderful.
really nice.
Yeah,
And
sounds
then,
like I need to get her to come on the podcast one day, huh? Talk
yes,
about
you do.
socks.
She's one that you
Yeah.
really need to have.
Well, I
Then
know
my
you have
second,
another daughter I'm going to have on too. So
yes, then
we're
I
going
have a
to the
second
second one
daughter.
now.
Pardon?
We're going to the second one now.
Yes, we'll move on to the second one. And her name is Johanne, and of course you met Johanne before me
I know
because
Johanne. Yeah,
she was quite a she's quite a gal.
she is.
Uh, I sent her to auction college, and she come back and said, "Dad, don't bother thinking I'm going to go to one day's college because I'm not going to. I love being an auctioneer, and I'm going to be an auctioneer." And of course, she was the first female uh, and the youngest person ever to win the state of California bid calling contest. And so, anyways, it's some car sales or something. You and hers paths crossed, and
No, we
immediately
sold
struck.
the first time I met her, actually, they had hired, I don't remember who they'd hired first, her or me. So one of us got hired, and then somebody decided one of us also needed to be a part of when the Arizona State had a racing horse association, and so they were having their sale. They were having a mixed breed sale, and so, anyways, they called me and asked. They said, "Hey, would you mind if we?" They, I guess, told me I was going to get the sale. Would you mind if we split it? And I said no. And then, of course, they hadn't told me who we'd be splitting it with. And then I started doing a little investigation, and then I found out they said, "Oh, well, you're going to be splitting it with a girl." I said, "With a girl," and of course, you know as well as I do, Earl. Today, actually, we have a podcast that's coming out on Camille Booker, and when I started in the industry in 2002, 2000. There just weren't a lot of female auctioneers,
No, no,
and so
it
actually
it was a good
she
old
was
boys club.
yeah, it was just this old, hairy-legged guys. But anyways, um, then so that actually, outside of auction school, I think she was for sure the first female that I ever worked with the sale. So, anyways, we sold a mixed horse breed sale together, and that's how I met her, and certainly
So
became a big fan
so
right away.
so yes. So anyway, her breaking into the industry, she got a lot of kickback naturally.
Hmm.
And I still remember after you guys had worked, I didn't know exactly where it was. She told me that she had met you and that you were one of the very first men to have ever appreciated her skills and made compliments and was uh, was not mean to her in any way. And
Hmm.
that always made me have a special spot in my heart for you
Well, I
because
appreciate that.
but that's she came back and said she'd met this man and that she really felt that if he had an opportunity he would help her in her career. And so anyway, she went off and become an auctioneer and of course worked for me and worked for other people, got in the car industry and sold a lot of cars and did a lot of things. And She'd sometimes be out of town and wouldn't help me at my sales, not because for any other reason other than she was really busy and other people would pay her more than Dad would. And that was certainly okay. Anyway, one day everything's going along. One day she calls me and she says, well, first of all, I'd mentioned a man's name earlier, Jack Lilly. I'd furnish a lot of cattle and horses in different movies for him, livestock, and he would be the wrangler. And I'd learned early on in my career that I didn't like working around the movie industry. I would rent you the cattle, I would rent you the horses, but I didn't want to do any of the wrangler work or be anywhere around that. I would drop them off, or I'd have a trucker drop them off. Whatever we needed to do, I'd get them to you. But I didn't want anything to do with any of the work around there. It was just, too many of the people weren't my kind of folks. Okay.
Amen. Yeah.
And I just didn't enjoy it. But there were certainly people in there that were, and I enjoyed those. And anyway, Mr. Lilly used to all the time tell me, hey, I'm going to get you in on a bit piece. I said, don't worry about it. I don't want to be in a movie. I have no desire to be in a movie. And it went on, and it got to be where he made a bet to me that one day he would get me in the movies. And I said, I'll bet you $100 you never do. He gave me a call one day, and he said, Earl, we're shooting a movie, and we have a horse sale, and we need an auctioneer, and you're the auctioneer. And he says, I'm going to get my $100 out of it. And so I said, you are. I said, you're going to get your $100. So I went, and I was an auctioneer for a day in a movie, and it was a fun experience. I had about maybe a 45-second clip in there as an auctioneer. It might be a little longer than that, but about that. But anyway, because you're an auctioneer and the amount of lines you have made me an A-listed actor. And so that puts you on a union set, that puts you in a different area than everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so when I got there, he said, hey, you need a clerk too, so bring a clerk along. So I asked Joe if she wanted to come and be my clerk. She said, of course, Dad. So she came with me, and we get down there. And of course, when I show up, it's being taped down at Chaffee College there, and not Chaffee, a college over there on the coast, Pepperdine University. It's being taped at Pepperdine University. And so get there, and I pull up in the parking lot, and there's a guy waiting there for us, and two guys. One is my porter, and one is the guy going to take the pickup and go park it. And so the porter has me jump in the back of a golf cart, and Joe goes again. He said, no, just Mr. Graham. And so in the union deal, if you're an A actor, nobody gets to get in your car with you. You ride by yourself. And so anyway, then I get over, and they're going to do makeup. And so Joe goes in for makeup, and they said, oh, no, you're an extra. You don't get any makeup. And so anyway, we went through the day like that. I was treated like royalty, and she was treated like a common person. And we shot the film, and that was always kind of a joke. And we giggled back and forth over that. And then one day, a few years later, she gets a phone call from a producer from Storage Wars. It says, we'd like to use you and your dad on Storage Wars. So she comes to me and says, Dad, we got to go into Hollywood and do a screen test. And I told her, I said, I don't think we got to go in there. They'll come out here and give us a screen test. And so she said, oh, Dad, you're going to ruin this opportunity. I said, I don't think so. So she calls them and tells them that they want to do a screen test. They need to come to our sale barn in Chino and do a screen test there. So anyway, they said they would do that. I said, now you got to call them back and tell them they got to pay us for it. She goes, Dad, you're just going to completely ruin it. I said, no, we're going to find out if they're serious or not. So Amen. She calls back and tells them we each got to get $500 for the screen test. They said, no problem. So here they show up with the $500, and they do a screen test. Producer calls us back in a couple of days and says, we want to sign contracts. And so they signed a contract with us. And the first contract was, they didn't know how many episodes they wanted us for, but they didn't want us to go to work for anybody else. So they paid us for not taking a job with anybody else in the industry. So that went on for about 6 months. They would send us a check every month, just for not doing any other TV work, which it wasn't like we were looking, or was there
Yeah.
anybody else knocking at the door. So it was just like pennies from
But you'd
heaven, right?
cash the check though, right?
But yes, we did cash the
Amen.
checks.
Amen.
And so anyway, they finally come with a contract for 3 episodes. And so this is the best part. When we get there to do the first episode, who's going to auctioneer first? So we decided we'd do a flip. And of course, they're filming us. By now, we're set up and they're filming us everything we're doing. And Joe and I are sitting there, horse playing around and kidding the other people who we'd never met. That's the other actors on the deal. But because it's a reality program, and you'd have no scripts, you have nothing. It's just kind of a free for all, right? And so we're just like you'd be at a regular auction. You know how we play verbal football before we get started, right? I mean, everything's fair game.
Yeah.
So, we're kind of doing all that kind of stuff, and it gets time, and she goes, "Who's going to start out, Dad?" I said, "Well, we'll flip for it." So we went through this big deal of flipping, and they're filming us through this flip. And about the time I won the flip, about the time we're supposed to start, I'm going to be the auctioneer, and the producer comes up and says, "No, no, no. We want Joe to be the auctioneer. You're just here as kind of like maybe her senior advisor or something."
Oh my goodness.
So the table had turned. And so she was the star, and I got to carry the clipboard around. And so it's kind of always been a joke. As people have seen the episodes, they would say that they would come up to me and said, "Man, I really enjoyed you auctioneering on the TV. I never auctioned one time." But in their mind, they put me as the auctioneer, which I never was the auctioneer on any one of the episodes. Joe was always the auctioneer, and sometimes Joe and I would be together when they would recognize us. And even today, sometimes it still happens because they still run the episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen
them. And so we'll be somewhere, and they'll tell me about being an auctioneer, and she goes, it's like they never even seen Joe sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it was a big turnaround, a big laugh. It's still a big laugh that when it came time for us to get to do an actual series, she was the auctioneer and Dad was the one that got to sit there with the clipboard. And so we had a lot of fun shooting those episodes.
I certainly know how you feel. I got, Madison, my daughter's in the auction business now, and she's actually taken our auction business over. Primarily focuses on, she sells junior livestock sales and then charity, but yeah, I'm second string now. Once in a while, she'll let me, if she books up 2 in a row or something, 2 in the same day, I'll get a little cameo appearance, but I don't get a lot of mic time either. So I know how you feel.
Yeah, no,
but
and hey, it's a great feeling, isn't it?
Oh man, it's the best right there. Yeah, absolutely. I love watching her work, and it's just nice for me to sit back and just take it all in. And
yes,
but she may be the real entrepreneur in the family, right?
Yes. So
let's lead up to what she's doing now.
All right. Well, so skip along. She got married, and I sold my sale barn in Chino. I'd told Rhonda whenever we started having grandkids that I would be in a position that we could stop and go to do grandkid stuff. So in order to do that, I had to sell my sale barn because that was a everyday, all day job when you own a sale barn, as you well know.
Oh yeah.
So I sold the sale barn, and but out of that came a opportunity to start doing farm sales and estate sales. So I started another company 20 some years ago doing estate sales and farm sales. And Joanne was instrumental with that from the beginning. And she worked with me on it as she worked for other people. But that was kind of a project that she worked with me. And so we built that business up, started building it up. And after she got married, her husband showed great interest into the business. He came in and added to it. He got his gun license because in California, you can't sell a gun that it doesn't go through
FFL.
Mm-hmm. And so he got his FFL license, and he added to it. And of course, in California, you can't sell a car if you're not a car dealer. And so we had our car dealership license. And so anyway, by then we were doing county auctions for different counties. We picked up
Surplus in
counties.
that.
Not surplus, but mostly what we did was when people within the county die, it's called public administrator stuff.
Okay.
So when
Mhm.
people in the county die and there's no family, the county takes it over and the county has it auctioned off. And some of our counties, because of how California has become, there's a lot of seniors left here without their families. Their families have moved out of California, and so mom and dad's left there, in some cases with a lot of stuff, and it all has to be sold and then the money sent to the family if the family don't want to deal with it. And so they call us in. So we were doing that for Riverside County, which is a fairly large county. It takes in, of course, Riverside, California, a lot of the Inland Empire area, and then, of course, all of Palm Springs and all of that area. So there's a lot of people there. And then we also got Orange County, and then we got San Diego County. And that's about the time when Rhonda sold her shares of the company to Joe and Jeff. And then I was going to stay on for a while, and I realized that, uh, you know, there had been such a swing in finding workers in the younger generation on how they worked and what they worked and their work values, and it just didn't mix with me well.
No.
And I was getting very frustrated, and I thought, there's no reason to do this. I have a ranch, and I have a couple of ranches, and I like feeding cattle, and I like raising cattle, and I like my hay business. There's no reason for me to do this. I might as well just retire from that. So I sold my shares to them, and they have taken it and went on with it. And then about that time here, a few years ago, 3 years ago or so, Joe came to me and said, Joe and Jeff, and said, "Hey, if you can find us a little ranch." Joe had her real estate license, but she wasn't being very active with them, other than just what she would sell within the auction company. And she said, if someone comes to you and tells you about a little ranch here on this road, Deep Creek Road, let us know. And a lot of people would come to me and tell me about that, because I usually had a list of folks that wanted a property over along here. So anyway, I had a lady call me, and I said, yeah, we'd like to look at it. So I got Joe and Jeff to look at it, and they looked at it, and they ended up buying it. And that was the beginning of Bougie Cattle. And so she now has a business called, they do their sale, bid fast and last. And that name come about as one of my things that I'd always say when I started an auction, not in the cattle business, but in whether it's anything outside the cattle business or professional, when you're dealing with just typical buyers and sometimes the first time buyers, I would tell people, at an auction, you only get to win if you're in last place. You have
That's
to be
right.
the last bidder to win. It's the only event that you get to be last place and win.
And win.
And I says, all you got to learn to do to enjoy this auction today is learn to bid fast and last. And so Joe took that and registered that, and that's what she ended up naming our auction company, as Bid Fast and Last. And so anyway, they have that, and then they have their Bougie cattle, and she sells all of her mini cattle. It's all miniature cattle. It's mixed breeds, and she tries to build show steers out of them, is what she really tries to build. And if you've seen the conformation of some of these cattle that she has, it's absolutely mind-boggling that she has this little animal that's 24 inches tall and 20 inches thick, and just as square and nice as could be, with a nice long hair coat on it. And that's what she looks for, and of course different unusual colors. And then she has an auction, and she'll have one next week, Bid Fast and Last, and where she'll sell about 25 of those calves. And people just really go nuts over it. It's amazing, and it amazes me. But she's put together quite a company there. And
How and of course I want to have her, on the podcast, because she's got a story certainly worthy of a podcast by itself. But how did she get into that, Earl? What precipitated that?
so she became sober, and she realized that if I'm going to be 100% sober, I've really got to find more to tie up my mind. And so she started looking into being some type of in the reproduction industry in the cattle business. And of course, the first thought was Angus. She realized, she said, Dad, I'll never have enough money to be a big player in any way in the Angus industry,
Sure.
nor any other breed. And then she ran across this miniature cattle, and she just fell in love with it, and that got her started. And she has really worked hard on genetics, on the science of it. She does a lot of embryo transplants, and that's how come she ends up with so many. She has a select number of cows that she really likes, and she has her bulls, and she does sexed semen a lot of times. And it's just she had to go out and find these labs that do all of that work. She had to find a dairy that she could put those embryos in, so she could have a group of calves coming and keep coming. And she's done all of that. And there's a lot of logistics that play into it, a lot of science and keeping them alive, and knowing how to do all of that. And she's been very, very successful with it. But she works extremely hard at it. I mean, a perfect example is she called me yesterday evening, and I said, I can be up there in a little bit. And it was, 8 o'clock at night, and her and I are going over some of her cows that she has questions about, and looking at things together. And, of course, they both had completed a full day at their auction house that day.
Mm-hmm.
And,
plus her real estate endeavors too, right?
And her real estate endeavors. And of course,
that's
along
really
with everything
now.
And along with everything else, she does a merch. She has a big line of merchandise that she sells with her calves. So, it's quite a project that the two of them are doing, and it certainly keeps them busy. And yes, she's one. And then Rhonda and I had a third daughter. And this young lady was a very special kid in that she was never one that you ever had to ask her to do her homework. She was never one that you ever had to tell her to get up twice. She would just, our third daughter was born on our 6th wedding anniversary. And she was just always like, you didn't even know Christy was around. Christy just did her stuff. And she was just always that way, but a really unique sense of humor, but had a real serious part in her life. And so when it come time, she grew up, of course, involved in FFA and become an American farmer, and did all the things, chapter president, this and that, and all the different things that she did. Always worked very hard at school, and always a straight A student. Never had to say, let's pick these grades up, or do you think you ought to go out? Never anything like that. She's one of these kids that could have absolutely raised herself. But yet had a real personality. Learned Spanish, just being around it. And she would stand around, and of course, a lot of the guys that worked for me didn't know she could speak Spanish, and she didn't speak Spanish to them. She just listened to what they had to say. And then the one man that ran my yard, he found out she could speak Spanish, and he used to tell him, "Be careful
Watch
what you say
saying,
around Christy,
yeah.
because she knows what you're saying,
She comprendes.
Anyways, she grew up in that, and of course, all three of my girls are fairly good equestrians, because they was raised in that. I put them on every piece of crap that come down the road. And
I bet. Yeah.
We got to find something good about this horse, right? Mm-hmm. If you ride it long enough, we'll figure out the good spots in it. And so
they had to be kid safe eventually, right?
Eventually, yes.
Whose kids got them safe?
and so they all became pretty good riders, and Christy really excelled. And as a teenager, she studied dressage, and she really worked. And there used to be a guy that I used to furnish a lot of roping cattle to, named Ricky Green. You might have heard of him and knew him. He was in Arizona. Spent a lot of time. I've sent hundreds of heads of roping steers to him in Arizona through his clinics. And so one day I said, "Hey, Ricky, if I set up enough people," I said, I got a daughter that would really like to go to your one of your clinics. If I set up enough people, will you come out here to California? He said, "Of course." So she took a clinic with him. A couple of them, actually. And of course, she wanted to know all about how the horse, what lead it needed to be on for this and that, and what she was doing and all that. And he goes, "I've never had a kid come and ask me about that stuff." He goes, but that's just how serious she takes everything. She's got to figure everything out. She went to a college here, California College, and she was got a degree in international ag marketing with an emphasis on French. And by the time she got out of college, she could speak fluent French. And she ended up having some of her money left over. So when she got out of college, she said, Dad, I want to go to France and I want to spend the summer there and I want to take a couple of French courses. So she went there and went to summer school in France. And then she came back and she went right to work as a school teacher, substitute school teacher. And she did that for 1 year and decided that she didn't want to become an ag teacher or a school teacher. And so she went to work for a date company. We raise a lot of dates here in California, as you know.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And she went to work for a date company that raises dates, but also a broker and brokers them all over the world. And she took on their international division. And she was the head of their international division, and she ran that for a couple of years for them. But she stayed in touch with her university, and Russia had broke up, and there was Eastern Europe was struggling. A lot of those countries didn't know what to do with their ag products. They had no USDA. They had nothing. So the Peace Corps came in and was going to set that up and got with the university, and she became a team that went to a country called Moldova to help them set up their foreign trade and stuff. And so she went over there for 2 years and was with the Peace Corps. And while she was there, she decided she wanted to become an attorney. So when she come back, she made the announcement to her mom and dad and said, I'd really like to go to law school.
Oh,
And
Lord.
she goes, will you help me? And of course, I've had a real bad deal of being able to tell my daughters no. So when they have something constructive to do, and our Heavenly Father has allowed her mother and I to be in a position that we can help.
Amen.
And so we got to help her some going through law school. She actually found a law school, a very good law school down in San Diego, that she could go for half tuition because of the time she had served in the Peace Corps and the fact that she had an agricultural background coming into law school. So, for her, she had to learn to speak a whole new language. And I'll never forget her first year, she called me and said, Dad, I'm just really struggling. Some of these kids, I said, well, what you got to understand is if you put that kid in the ag industry, they wouldn't know the language. I said, you just don't know the language yet.
Mm-hmm.
I said, by the time you're done with this year, you'll be able to speak law language.
Mm-hmm.
And so she really went to studying it. And by the time she came out of law school, she had become a very good law writer. She really learned the language well. And her first job was with the city of San Diego, writing legal documents for them. Which was when she got out, she said, Dad, I'm not certain what kind of law I want to go into. I said, well, we're going to call it rent law. She says, what do you mean, Dad? I said, something that pays the rent, okay? So she went to practicing rent law. But anyway, she now is married and has 2 wonderful boys. And she also, when she was, before she was married, she come to me and she said, Dad, I'm down here in San Diego and I think we could sell grass-fed beef. And in those days, I had quite a few ranches leased and we would gather. And of course, you always leave a couple Mavericks behind. They never get everything gathered. And I didn't worry about it because the next year when I turned out, they'd be there and I'd just have some big old steers to gather up the next year. So she said, Dad, if you'll let me take those Mavericks, we'll kill those and put them in through a USDA plant. I can sell that meat down here in San Diego. So we started doing that. It wasn't long and that business had built to where we were taking all of our own. I had one ranch where I had about 150 Angus cows on there, all black cows and bred back to black bulls. And really nice set of genetics. And so we started doing that with those because they really would get fat nicely on grass. Those good genetics would. And so she started a company, True Pasture Beef, and it was from conception to consumption.
Oh.
And so it was a hit. And it wasn't long, and we were doing about 120 beef a year. And it was a box program where you signed up and you got a box of beef every month and sent to your family. And it was a great success. And then she got married, and her husband was doing that. Of course, he was working besides, and she was working besides, but they would do this. And then the first baby come along, and they kept trying to do it. And finally she says, Dad, I don't know if this, we're really struggling. I said, well, just shut it down. We'll figure out something else to do with them. I mean, that's not an issue, right? So anyway, that's when I started selling grass-fed beef, but I would only sell full carcasses, and I still do that. And we only sell full carcasses. But she lives down in the San Diego area with her two boys and her husband. And she keeps a horse in a boarding facility down there. They have a real nice home there, and she's an attorney, and her husband has an education, a good job, and they get to live a very nice lifestyle, very quiet, nice lifestyle. Not like
What kind of law? What kind of law does she practice primarily?
So now she is working for the state of California Department of Justice, and she is an attorney for them. And it is a lot of trial work that she does. And so, yeah, her personality fits that very well.
Certainly your father must be looking down and smiling from heaven to know that he enticed and promoted this kind of entrepreneurship, that goes down through generations. That's undeniable, right?
Undeniable. Yes, sir. And one of the nicest things as I look back on my life today is I have 3 son-in-laws. All 3 of them are very different, completely different type of men, but all 3 are wonderful. And, I can honestly say probably better dads than I am. And, really, really work on relationships with their kids and have phenomenal relationships and relationships with their wives. And, as a dad that raises girls, when you get to see that, you get to see that they're happy and they're happily married and with families and doing the things, there's really nothing any better than that. It really isn't. And, very fortunate that I had a dad that, that taught me a lot, but probably the best thing he taught me was he taught me how to pray, and he taught me how to work and enjoy it. And, that's a pretty big gift.
And then make your word mean something, right?
And make your word mean something. Yes. And those, and as we move into our society today, we have so many kids, like you say, that don't get that opportunity to have a dad like that. Rhonda and I have probably had over 20 kids that have at some point in their life lived in our home with us while we raised our family. They'd come from broken homes and one thing and another. And all of those people are still stay in touch with us today. And, they'll bring their kids and they'll tell their kids, this was the best time in my life. And this is when I decided that I had to, and these kids would come and, it wasn't vacation time. We always got up early and we always had things to do, and they had to do the same thing. And they could have went home and just laid on the couch and watched TV and watched their parents be drunk and fight and do all of that, or not have, be 1 week with dad or 1 week with mother or whatever the case was. But they would rather be at our place on a very disciplined, very, very disciplined deal.
Structured.
Even a young man that ended up buying a sale barn from us at one point had lived with us for about 6 months. And, Ron and I had to sit down and come up with what that person had to be in order for us to allow him to come into our home and come in to become part of our family to that extent, and you had to see something there in them that you knew you really felt that you were going to do some good. And there were some of those kids that it didn't do any good, but some of them I think did. But I look at that.
Well, heck, if you helped one, you're doing fantastic.
It's worth it. The other thing that Rhonda and I did early on in life is we set up a nonprofit. And this nonprofit, we would have people come to us and ask us for, will you give us, we're doing this, will you give money to this, will you give money to that? And we started doing that, and we said, hey, this is kind of out of control. We need to have a focus with this. We've always had a focused life, and this is, it's very important that you make sure the money that you hand over to somebody that it goes right. So I said, and I talked to some of my friends, and they were experiencing the same thing. I got the idea to start a nonprofit, and so what would we call the nonprofit? We called it WHOA, Wild Horseman of America. We called it, and so and so anyway, we started this nonprofit. It's still today. And we started having fundraisers and raising money for different things, and mostly for kids. And we had a program where we supported widows and orphans, and first responders, and then also other family members. So if you're an officer and you get killed in the line of duty, if you have kids, they're going to get counseling. Your wife's going to get counseling, but your 14-year-old brother over here that just lost his big brother doesn't get any counseling. And he probably really needs it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we set up a program through another nonprofit where we would pay for that counseling, and we would provide that. Maybe it's maybe a woman had already lost her husband and now she lost a son. The county, our county and our state is going to pay for her any counseling or any type of relief. And so now we've seen a huge gap there. So we went to work on that, and of course then we also worked at our fair with the junior livestock exhibitors, and having special things with different kids that needed help getting there to the fair for some reason. Maybe they're in a broken home and there just wasn't quite enough money to buy a project or to do this or that. And so we would help with those things. And, not doing it for any reason other than we felt it needed to be done. And I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, something like that, our county recognized us, Rhonda and I, and they gave us what's called the Arrowhead Award. We have, our county is part of our county's seal is an arrowhead. So they have this Arrowhead Award, which is the highest award that you can give any buddy in our county. And ours was the 13th one since San Bernardino County. And our award, we were the 13th recipient to receive that. We were the first married couple to receive it, and Rhonda was the first female to have received it. And I think since then, in about this amount of time that it's been, I think they've given away one more award since then. So they're either on 15 or 16 now. So it's a very special award, and it's something that I will always covet to some degree. When we received it, the local newspaper wanted to come and do an article on us, and I said, no, you don't need to do an article on us. There's other things more important. I said, you can tell them we want it, but I said, I really don't want that. I said, it took a lot of people to get us there, and it did. It took a lot of other folks that worked and helped with that. The project that we did then was a very large project, and most of the money was raised through doing horse rides, and then of course an auction at the horse ride, and we produced some really nice trail rides that raised a lot of money for those things. So, Paul, I've been a very blessed man. Yes. Rhonda and I are about to celebrate 53 years of marriage. And, we just got back from a ranch up north, and it's a little over almost 3 sections of land up there that is Central Coast country. It's a little different than Arizona country, but our neighbor's cattle had gotten in on us, and I called him, and he says, I'd like to ship my cattle, Earl. But he says, I don't have anybody to gather those cattle. I said, well, if you're up there, if you can get the trucks lined up on Sunday, Rhonda and I'll go up and gather all those cattle, and I'll have them in our pens, and I'll have them sorted, and we can ship those cattle Sunday evening. And so we got up there Sunday. We got up early in the morning and drove up there, saddled our horses, put them in the trailer, got out, unsaddled our horses. I did string out a little hay to cheat as much as I could with the hay. And then
Hey, you got to be smart, right?
and then we each took off in separate directions and started finding cattle and bringing them, pushing them back toward the catch pens, and we had all those cattle gathered and ready to go in just a couple of hours. And just two old people, nobody else, and we have a ranch set up like that we can do that, and just to have the time of our life at this age, still go out and get on a horse and just I just I'm a little bit crazy, I guess, because I don't have a problem kicking out a horse loose and covering some country out there. And there's squirrel hole after squirrel hole, and people say, I won't even ride a horse across some of that country of yours, because
Mm-hmm.
California doesn't allow us to poison them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So we're a little overrun with ground squirrels, but it's just, and that's still, the height of our glory is getting to go up there and stay a couple days on that ranch. And we don't have anybody that stays there on that ranch to work those cattle. We have it set up with solar wells, and we have springs and ponds and little creeks that water the cattle. And so we go up there once or twice a month, and then we go up at times and fix fence and do all the things you got to do. But yeah, that's kind of our happy place.
Amen. Well, and us having this conversation today on the podcast, one thing it's came to me, I should have thought about it a little bit prior to the lead up to this, but I'll just have to have you come on another time, because I think we can do a whole podcast just on selling horses and horse transactions and
Yes,
some of your horse stories and stuff like that. Just for the sake of time today, we're not going to be able to get there, but I want to do another segment where we'll come and talk about your trades and your swaps. And I know we could eat up another hour pretty easily on that.
very
Right?
easy on that. Yes.
Yeah.
At my height, when I was in my 50s, I used to hand trade over 300 horses a year, besides what I put through the auctions. And
Wow.
to buy that many horses to be able to hand trade was a job. And
Mm-hmm.
I used to attend one or two other auctions a month, to be able to do that. And when I got there, it was all about business, and there used to be a sale barn there in El Paso, and a good friend of mine, Joe Rios, ran that,
Oh yeah, my friend
and
too.
a great man, and
Mm-hmm.
a real, I mean, he just did a heck of a job running that yard. And the first time I went down there, he come to me, and he'd worked hard to get me to come to sale, because he'd watched me at other sales buy horses, and he'd talk to me, and finally I decided, okay, he's got enough there to be worth my while to go. And I get there, and of course, I never sat down. I'm up and I'm out looking at horses. I'm back in seeing this, and I'm just, I mean, I'm, 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 I'm like a mole or something, just running around constantly. And so he comes to me and he says, he come and he had his girl there with him, one of his gals that had a little tray with some drinks on it for me. He says, here, have a drink. And I told him, I says, you understand, if I do this, I'm going to go sit down and I'm going to drink. I'm not going to buy. And so
Take the drinks
he,
away.
he chased her away. And so anyway, yeah, it was, I ended up buying a lot of horses through that little sale barn there in El Paso.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to circle back and we'll just do the Earl Graham horse trades
Very
and
good.
trades, because I know there's
Yes.
some real estate trades and there's some equipment trades, and I know there's some good stories that most
Yes.
auctioneers, one of the unique things, I feel really blessed. I tell my daughter all the time, I was born in 64, and so I was raised through the 70s and the 80s. And I don't know, I think probably every group of people thinks that period in their life is the best period or the most nostalgic period. I don't know, but I still believe that. One of the great things, for me, Earl, is that just some of the old timers that I got to, meet out here in Arizona. And of course, a lot of the ones that I, would refer to, just
Right.
about cattle trades and horse trades and stuff like that. I just feel so blessed that I got to know those people. And that's one of the reasons I started this. We started our magazine was, my wife would constantly, because I worked for Arizona Feeds, and then, I moonlighted as an auctioneer. And then I finally came to a stage in my auctioneer career where I could make a living, pay the bills, off of it. And I just feel so fortunate, to have known people like you and all the people. And that's the reason we got this podcast is I want to tell these type of stories because it's, I mean, I don't know. I know people would say there are, but they just don't seem to be people like, those kind of people anymore, people
You
that you
know,
could just do.
I'm very, very optimistic because I see a lot of it. I get to see a lot of it. I
Mhm.
really do. I get to see a lot of it. One of the things that we have in California right now is we lost a lot of people that didn't want to put up with politics and didn't want to put up with it and didn't want to stay and fight. And it's amazing. I have I sat on a few board of directors where we're absolutely fighting for the right to continue our lifestyle and absolutely fighting to the death on some of this stuff. Okay, and
Mhm.
we could make a whole podcast about that.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, uh, I sat on the board of directors of the Farm Bureau. I sat on the board of directors of our USDA ag program here in this county. I sat on the board of directors for our sheriff's council, and our sheriff department is huge. We have an airport, we have an air force. I mean, I think we have some 20 some different helicopters or airplanes, fixed wing or helicopters within it. A huge, huge county. It's the largest county in the United States, so we have a lot of ground to cover, and we have a lot of people, and we just have a lot. And so I we're fighting this, but in the middle of all this, I'm seeing these young people rise, and I'm seeing them come, and they're great young folks. They're
Mhm.
absolutely. California has some of the greatest young people in the world, and they're fighters. And California is going to come back. I may not live long enough to see it, but it's going to come back. And there are so many of these young folks, and I get to see them, and I get to rub shoulders with them, and they're ready to jump out front and get right in the middle of things. And
Mhm.
it's pretty amazing to see this. Last night I was visiting with my son-in-law, and we were talking about some of the ones that we know and we see them coming on, and we see what they're doing. And it's really amazing to see this right now. And I've been noticing this for the last couple of years here in California that the people that just want to the heck with California and want to leave, or the heck with it, I'm not going to vote, I'm not going to do anything because we just don't we it's just not I'm just not going to fight for it. A lot of those folks have left, and now the people that are here are the real fighters. And it's we're seeing the tide turn, not as fast as I'd like to see it, but it's definitely turning. And I think we have a whole group of young folks that are coming on that are going to be real characters and are going to have that to them. And I'm fortunate enough to get to work with some of these young folks in these projects, and I'm
Yeah.
very excited about it.
For sure, I totally agree with you. In the fact that there's just a gap in there, between kind of our generation and this younger generation.
Mm-hmm.
Where, but anyways, I totally agree with you. I run across and deal with some really really dynamic young people, and I think they've seen, and I don't want to get political here, but I think they've seen a lot of these young people have seen enough, and they don't want to see that anymore. You know what I mean?
No,
They're
no,
take want to take
they
charge,
they
and they
they
know
get
that
it.
doesn't work. They're smart
Yeah,
enough.
they
They
get it.
they know that can't work long term. That's not sustainable. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
at some point in time, we need to slide back to, I'm not saying that everybody should be able to fit in the same peg, but what I am saying is that, sometimes this, mentality that, on the heels of our generation, this go along to get along kind of deal
Well,
probably hasn't
in my
worked.
generation, it became the feel good generation. If it felt good, it had to be right.
Hmm.
you know and that was the real hippie movement, right? I mean, if it
Yeah.
felt good, it had to be right. And those folks got into politics, and that's what we have today in California. If it felt good, it had to be right. And these young kids want to see science prevail. They want to see math prevail. They want to see common sense prevail. And it's going to, like I said, I may not live long enough to see it, but it's going to happen. It's happening. And I'm excited about it.
And Earl, I think innately, especially these young people, they know right from wrong.
Sure.
and they know what's sustainable, like I say, and they know that, that won't work, that there has to be some kind of a semblance of, civility, but more importantly, there has to be some rules and some guidelines. Otherwise, you're going to have anarchy. And I think a lot of young people are realizing that. And
Yes.
I talked with a guy that had the other day, yeah, he's got 5 businesses. And of course, I made a negative comment, which I shouldn't have made, but he has mainly his staff in these they're kind of drink places, and
Mm-hmm.
he college and high school kids is 80% of who works for him. And I kind of said something, oh my gosh, bless you, or whatever. How do you do it? Or, I couldn't do it. You alluded to the fact that you saw that there was a change, in your auction business, with the younger people coming in, that hard for you and I, guys like you and I, when we say we're going to start at 8, you should be there at quarter to 8 and be ready to
Right.
work at 8, not come draggling in there at 8:15 or whatever. But anyways, what he said to me was he countered me right away. He said, Paul, you know what? I don't find that to be true. He said, I have some of my best kids, young people or high school kids, and some of these young college kids. He said, I just don't see that. They're just super good. They're very conscious. And of course, you and I both know about technology. They're
Mm-hmm.
smart. They're smart. A lot of them articulate themselves really well. And he was extremely optimistic. Matter of fact, he says he's going to open another couple shops because he runs up on people that he doesn't have room to employ them, but he wants to employ them because there's so much quality people out there. So, I mean, that's a breath of fresh air, and certainly that's I changed my perspective, and making those kind of comments.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're
So,
right. There's a lot of good young people out there. So, you know, anyways, well, shoot. I guess we'll wrap this segment up.
all right.
I had a couple questions though I wanted to ask you. I guess if you had a defining, philosophy for you in your life, what would what would you tell, I guess what would you tell a younger Earl Graham that maybe you missed, in
I
becoming
would
Earl
I
Graham?
would tell myself to have really started. I was raised in a religious home, and I took it for granted. I went part of my life without reading my Bible every day and doing those things, and staying in full contact in that regard. And I would tell myself to have never ever have dropped that back, and to make sure that every day there's a certain amount of time set aside for prayer and study and reflection on yourself. Are you being the best man you can be? Are you being the best husband you can be? Are you being the best dad you can be? And I think that for me, I got involved in doing things, and I would keep myself too busy to sometimes take that time and do that. And I think that's the biggest thing, that if you stay in touch with our Heavenly Father and make that relationship grow and continue to grow throughout your life, I think that is the ultimate gold. That is the ultimate gold in our life, is to have that relationship. And we get too busy chasing dreams. And I never was a money chaser. I was always a dream chaser, and I loved deals. And
Mhm.
I never was a guy that sat down every night and counted what I had done. I just went out and just made deals and done things. And I had people in the office that took care of that part of it. I would just, I knew if I did enough, and I was having such fun, and I should have slowed down and built my relationship better throughout my life. And but that's the number one thing. And if you have that relationship, you won't make nearly as many bad decisions in life.
No, but then at some point, Earl, you got to be thankful that you're at a point in time where you realize that, and now
Oh,
you're able to foster that, and life. I don't know for you, I'm 61 now. Life seems to be more precious than it's ever been, and I'm more thankful and grateful for that. But I'm also thankful, just like you. I spent quite a bit of time over there in the desert myself. Walking around. drinking or whatever, was,
Right.
doing whatever I needed to be done. Luckily, I never got in too much trouble because God had grace
Yes.
on me back then. But I am appreciative of the fact that I'm at a point in time in my life where I realized how important that is, without missing that. Because, I mean, Lord knows you and I, we've been in enough situations where it wouldn't have been, nobody would have been surprised if we were gone a long time ago. You know what I mean?
No. No. Yes. Yeah. Praise the
And
Lord.
so just be
Yeah.
grateful for that He spared
Yes.
us. And maybe that was the reason. He said,
Maybe.
they
Maybe.
can't take
There's
Earl
always
right
a
now.
reason for everything.
Yeah,
And
Earl needs I'm not done with Earl yet. Or Paul too. So
yes.
anyways,
So
well, shoot, Earl, it was a fantastic visit. Like I say, our listeners, I promise I'll circle back with Earl in a later date, and we're just going to talk about trades and auctioneers, and him and I are both passionate about the auction industry, but more importantly, we're more passionate about trades. And I'm like you, same thing you said. I never was about the money. I never. I just always was about what are we going to do tomorrow? What are we
yes.
going to trade? What are we going to flip?
Y- y-
It's amazing how our lives kind of are parallel in the fact that at a young age I just always wanted to trade something. I wanted to swap something. I just love trade and swap.
I have this last thing I'd like to say, and that was through all my deal. The one thing I used to do is I used to just think, and I'd just lift my hands up and I'd say, "Thank you, God, for putting me in this position," because I felt like I was in a playground. I absolutely felt like a kid in a playground.
Yeah, it's your
Uh,
realm, huh?
it was my realm, and I just got to go
Right
play
on.
every day.
Amen.
And one of the things I told Rhonda, I told her, I says, she's keeps a beautiful home and makes our home just our house a beautiful house. But she didn't enjoy having to cook dinners and cook the meals and stuff. She always did a great job and always had dinner ready and always fed the kids properly. And so I told her, when we were raising our family, I said, when the kids are raised, you no longer ever have to cook me another meal if you don't want to. And she'd go, "What do you mean?" And I says, and I tell this to my buddies, and they go, "Why would you tell your wife that?" I said, "Because when I get out playing in my playground, I may not want to stop at 5 o'clock
Come
and
home.
come to the house and have to eat. And
Eat.
if I have my wife doing that, then I have to do that." I said, "I want the freedom to come back in the house whenever I want." I said, "Eating something, even though I'm bigger than I need to be." I said, "It
Yeah,
doesn't hurt to miss a meal when you're out having fun.
exactly.
And I
Yeah.
still look at my life as just getting to be a big kid playing around in a playground. And,
Amen.
I'm just very blessed in that.
We are blessed. Amen.
Yes.
Well, Earl, I'm gonna let you go,
Take
and
care, my
we'll
friend.
circle back. Hey, thank you, and
Thank you.
yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. I knew it would be, like I say, look at here, we did an hour and 30 minutes.
Wow.
Listeners, I apologize, but I promise you'll enjoy it. It's a good, great conversation, and it's wonderful to see people that live our lifestyle, and but more importantly, someone that actually worked and took life serious, but not too serious. And so
Right.
that's one of the whole reasons I wanted to have you on here, Earl. So we're going to finish up today. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll finish up here, and we'll talk one more time. Earl, thanks. And you got a promise to come back, right?
We'll do it.
Okay.
Take care.
Lady, Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Western Ag Life podcast. We've had Earl Graham on today from California. Don't forget, thank our sponsors, and really do me a favor if you would. We're in our third year, and the podcast circulation is doing really well, but it continues to grow by you guys telling your friends and family and pass it along. Our passion for the agriculture and the Western lifestyle is the whole reason we do this podcast. And so we'll finish up here thanking the Anchor F Cattle Company for sponsoring this episode. They're going to have their 11th annual club calf sale, which is going to take place Sunday, November the 23rd. And this year, 2025, they'll have a preview at noon. Dean always has some hot dogs, or he'll have some food, and there'll probably be some merch around there for you too. 1 p.m., they're going to have a live sale. There'll be no internet bidding. However, if you'll make arrangements with Dean prior to the auction, he'll set up a phone number for you to call, and you can bid on over the phone. Sale's going to take place at the Santa Cruz County Fairgrounds in Sonoyta, Arizona. And again, if you want to call Dean and talk with Dean about anything prior to the sale, his cell phone is 520-988-8009, and you can reach him at his email address at anchorf@gmail.com. All right, ladies and gentlemen, On behalf of all of us here at the Western Ag Life Podcast, we'll see you soon.